And I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to my distinguished colleague from Fresno. I do not agree with him on this particular bill, but I do want to say that he's been a champion for his district and certainly has great command of the water issue. Mr. Costa.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from California for yielding me 2 minutes. I strongly urge my colleagues to support the Western Water and Food Security Act that we are debating here today. And yes, we are debating this issue, and this is not new. What you've exhibited here and seen this morning is where the water fault lines lie in California, and it also is reflective of many of the western states. But this historic drought, this 4 years of historic drought, has pointed out clearly that we have a broken water system in California. And here we are on the floor having another debate over whether or not we're going to pass a bill to help people, because at the end of the day, these are people problems in every region of California. And nowhere have those people been more impacted than in the San Joaquin Valley, of which many of us represent. These are families where parents have lost their jobs, whose children have not able to attend school. These are farm workers, these are farm communities that have been felt the most severe impact of this drought and the water constraints that we now are dealing with. My colleagues on the Democratic side argue that this is simply a cause of 4 continuous dry years. And while that is partially true, it ignores that talking point doesn't recognize that, in fact, we have a broken water system designed for 20 million people. Communities in the San Joaquin Valley have seen their water supply reduced long-term by 40%. And agricultural use has declined over the last 40 years because we're more efficient water users. Some in my area have had a 0 water allocation the last 2 years. 0, that's no water. And this reduced reliability has impacted every region of the state, to be sure. It's impacted large metropolitan areas like the Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, San Diego, as well as the small, rural, and often disadvantaged communities like those in the valley that I represent. This measure, H.R. 2898, takes a step towards addressing long-standing imbalance by enhancing scientific management of the water projects in California and then giving it greater flexibility. It also provides additional storage. I ask the gentlewoman for another minute, please.
I yield the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, a minute.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
I thank the gentlewoman. It provides additional flexibility to increase our water supply. We have to use all the water tools in the water management toolbox. That includes increasing storage capacity. And this is about time that we begin doing that. It also tries to address many of the other factors that are preventing the recovery of endangered species, like the invasive species that are a result of a lot of the decline in salmon in California. Let me quote Karen Hess, an author of Out of the Dust. She says, "The way I see it, hard times aren't only about money or drought or dust. Hard times are about losing the spirit and hope and what happens when dreams dry up." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that a lot of the dreams are drying up in the people that I represent in the San Joaquin Valley. This drought is crushing their spirit, making them feel as if their dreams never become a reality, and too often feel like they're the country cousin, literally and figuratively, of the two urban areas in Southern California and Northern California. The solution that California needs is not more talking points, but legislation working together on a bipartisan basis. This legislation starts that process. It's a work in progress. Obviously, it will be amended, it will be changed as we work with the Senate later this fall.
Gentleman's time
and I
expired.
yield back the balance of my time.
It is now in order to consider Amendment 6, printed in House Report 114-204. For what purpose does the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise for an amendment that is before the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 114-204, offered by Mr. Costa of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 362, the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and the ranking member, since the early 1990s, the federal and state lawmakers and regulators have made a number of policy choices to implement the Act of the Endangered Species and Clean Water Act and the Central Valley Project Improvement Act. All of these have had good intentions, from the Trinity River to the Shasta River Reservoir, to the San Francisco Bay Delta, and up to the San Joaquin River. About 3.5 million acre feet of Central Valley Project and State Water Project has been, as a result of those acts, rededicated for environmental management purposes. The Central Valley Project Improvement Act alone, since its enactment, has resulted in over 17 million acre-feet of water being reprioritized for different needs and for different purposes. It's important to note that this doesn't mean that the water in reprioritization doesn't continue to serve multiple purposes within the system, because it does. But it does mean that the use has been prioritized so that, in fact, it must meet environmental objectives over that of human needs, which are a distant second to the environmental uses of this water as a result of the passage of those previous acts. These changes, I believe, have harmed a large number of Californians, including those from small, rural, and often disadvantaged communities that I represent, as well as to the larger areas that are dependent upon this water supply, whether we talk about Santa Clara and Silicon Valley or Los Angeles and the Metropolitan Water District. Approximately 25 million people in 7 of the nation's top 10 agricultural counties have seen their water supply diminish and their water cost escalate over the last 20 years. That's a fact. And as my colleagues say, you know, facts are hard to dispute. But the increased cost has been there, and the reduction of the water supply is, in fact, a result of this. Many of the farmers I serve have seen their water supplies diminish to 40% of their long-term average, and have received no surface water for the last 2 years. Communities that I've represented have had their drinking wells go dry, leaving entire towns without a water supply for drinking or bathing. These are incredibly harmful impacts to a very simple question. We ought to know the benefits. Has society benefited from the policy changes to dedicate the water for these important environmental purposes, like preventing the extinction of species, which none of us want to do? The answer, I'm sad to say, is it seems to have had not the impact that was intended, because the species continue to decline. Unfortunately, though, notwithstanding efforts within the federal agencies, the state agencies, and the National Academy of Sciences, we don't really know. We don't really know because we don't have an accurate reporting or accounting of how in-stream flows are used, and what benefit is expected to be achieved by them, and whether the benefit was achieved by those flows. I would certainly feel a little better knowing that we are increasing the species, the salmonoid in California, notwithstanding the loss of water. But in fact, the salmonoid have continued to decline. Dedication of millions of acre-feet of water and the expenditure of billions of dollars has resulted in a water supply situation that has never been worse for all of California. Likewise, the condition of the species to which we have been dedicated so much has never been so much at risk. The latest Delta smelt population index is 0, and the status of protected salmon is in serious doubt. And while the extinction of these species isn't probable given the hatchery-based fish populations, the potential loss of wild populations is of grave concern to all of us. One thing that the drought has achieved to make operational priorities of the project abundantly clear is that first priority of the projects, besides this co-sharing, is flood control. God, I would pray that it would flood in California. Love to have what they're having in Texas. But second priority is followed by salmon temperature management, which is very problematic right now as a result of this drought, followed by protecting the Bay Delta water quality, and people ought to have good water quality. I want my friends in the Bay Area to drink good, fresh water. And finally, any possible deliveries to the communities for the refuge wildlife, which I spoke to a moment ago, that includes grasslands and other refuges, as well as our farms that produce the food. I am introducing this amendment to create at least some accountability and transparency in the environmental management efforts underway, so that we can better understand and so we can measure what is working and what isn't working. And that's why this amendment is important. I ask that it be adopted for all the reasons that I have stated, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time's expired. Does any member seek time in opposition? The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.